every single company that does this, every single company that has this moral cowardice, they need to be punished where it hurts them, which is financially. And so I'm glad their stock is tanking. I hope people are canceling their Planet Fitness memberships left and right and going to other gyms and going to gyms that are going to look out, for the safety of women.
Normally, we like to focus on comic books and comic book movies and kind of stuff like that, pop culture type stuff. But recently, there was a study out of Finland that I thought was pretty darn interesting. And I actually had a conversation with our good friend Aaron Sparrow about it. But I do have to acknowledge that a lot of the weird stuff that's going on in the world, a lot of the woke stuff, if you want to call it that, and I know that's the term that a lot of people are using. It's even the term that they're using in the headline talking about the study. And in a lot of ways, what's going on in mainstream culture has already been done to us. We're kind of the guinea pigs for all of this stuff. Pop culture is actually upstream from mainstream culture. A lot of times people in the mainstream don't even realize what's going on or what the motives of people are within corporations or whatever to kind of shape our views and change how we view certain things or make us feel bad for feeling one way or another. It all kind of happens in pop culture, and then it kind of trickles out into the mainstream. And a lot of people are starting to recognize a lot of the weird stuff that's going on there. So I'm going to read the research of this article, then I'm going to show you what Aaron and I had to say about that. And then I'm going to read a couple of other things that we ended up getting into that kind of fed off of that. Just the way that culture is changing, and a lot of people are fighting back now, especially within like women's sports and stuff like that. And I thought it was really, really interesting stuff. Maybe not so much comic book related, but certainly related to culture wars. And certainly I think a lot of people would have to acknowledge at this point, the culture war is real. It's definitely going on. And if we do nothing about it, we're just willing accomplices with this, we will lose our culture basically en masse. That is exactly what the radical left are trying to do. Now let's get to this research. Psychological researchers in Finland have created an assessment to help measure an individual's commitment to principles of social justice and made some surprising findings across the Finnish population, including a negative correlation between progressive ideals and levels of happiness. Specifically, researchers found a high prevalence of anxiety and depression in people who believe the statement, if white people have an average higher income than black people, it is because of racism. More broadly, they found that those who identified as left-wing were most likely to report lower mental well-being.
Who is that surprising to? Like, they were shocked to find that? I didn't have to do a paper. I could have just looked at people.
Yeah, we've already seen the correlation. It's basically played out over the last decade.
Yeah, it absolutely has. I don't know anybody who's on the far left that's happy. Like, none of my friends who are like far left are happy. And it seems like the more to the right or to the center or to the right that my friends are, the happier they are. And they're not happy right now with the current state of the country, but overall in their individual lives, they're very happy people. And it turns out that God and family and all of these things that are traditionally, the building block of our society, it turns out that those things contribute to overall happiness. Who could have guessed that the thing that has worked for centuries continues to work?
The pillars of modern civilization are there for a reason.
Yeah, exactly right. We don't need to chip away at those tent poles.
Oh, they have.
Oh, they have. They look. This leads into a greater kind of conversation that has been starting to happen as you've been able to actually talk about these things and actually ask questions, which wasn't allowed a few years ago. But as as kind of like people have started to push back against this woke mind virus, as it were, is you see people that get caught up in this ideology. Like, why is it that nobody who suddenly decides that they're non-binary, why doesn't their appearance get more attractive? If that is like the truest form of their happiest self, why do they make themselves uglier? Why is that? It's the destruction of beauty. And I was thinking of it last night in the terms of the Lord of the Rings and the things that hate beauty. It's like all of these people like are making themselves look like they're, getting ready to move to Mordor. It's like
the Eye of Sauron. They got him.
Yeah, the time of man is over. Now is the time of the orc. And they all look like orcs. Like, what are you doing? And then they're not happy. There's a study that just came out that said, and it turns out that gender affirming your child that decides that they're trans doesn't reduce the chance of suicide. We need to be able to question everything. And the moment that you have a narrative that you're told you're not allowed to question, you need to question it even harder, because we are not being compassionate by just rubber stamping mental illness and telling people that you're okay. This is the truest form of who you are. People need help. And when people are struggling, we need to have enough love to say, you're going to get tough love. We're going to help you, but we're not just going to coddle whatever it is that's in your head. We're going to get to the root of this problem. And that's what society is not willing to do. It's a very lazy and lackadaisical society that doesn't want to be bothered. There's no inherent compassion, I find, in modern progressivism. There is only laziness and the desire to not be bothered. And so what do? We just leave people to their devices and we let them harm themselves. And we tell them it's that don't worry, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You think 200 years ago, something like this would come out and they would have drilled a hole in your brain, which is the wrong thing to do. That probably wasn't the right treatment for any illness, specifically mental illness and stuff like that. And then along the way, treatment changed and they realized you don't actually treat mental illness. Like with physical repairs, you need therapy and sitting down, and some people are beyond fixed, and we got to have a place for them. And we would have institutions where people would go and get the help that they needed. And somehow we've gone past that to where the best thing that we can do for people with mental illness is to tell them there's nothing wrong with them and then act like what they're doing is normal.
And then make accommodations that are actually harmful to the rest of society. It's completely backwards. It's a completely demonic ideology. And listen, this is all my opinion based on what I think. And if you have a different opinion, you have the right to question what I'm saying. You have the right to question my conclusions on this, because we should have a dialogue. I'm not telling you that you can't question my narrative. That's against everything that I'm saying. You should be able to ask questions about everything.
Just fascinating stuff right there. And obviously very well said by Aaron Sparrow. That's why we like to have him here on the channel, because he really doesn't give a fuck. He gives you his opinion, but he does spell it out very well. Now that kind of led us into another conversation about something that happened recently with Planet Fitness, where this lady had gone into the women's locker room, and basically because she didn't feel like a biological male should be in there, she ended up losing her Planet Fitness membership. Just really crazy stuff, the way that they're trying to affect the way that we're living our lives. If you don't buy into this stuff, or if you're not quiet about it, if you're outspoken about it, a lot of corporations and governments will do what they can to silence you and basically try to remove you from society. Planet Fitness saw the valuation of the company's stock drop this week after an Alaska gym canceled a woman's membership when she photographed a male using the women's locker room. The price drop followed an incident in which Patricia Silva encountered a man in the women's locker room shaving. She also claimed in a video posted to Facebook that there was a little girl sitting in the corner. She could have been about 12 years old in a towel, kind of freaked out. Silva added that the man had been shaving his face and told her that he was queer. After she relayed her complaints to management, Silva said her membership was revoked for violating the rules against photographing other gym users.
We're taking everything away from the left is taking everything away from women, even their identity. It's bizarre. And I don't, I do understand where it's coming from to an extent. Like I said, it's a demonic ideology, but the fact that women are starting to stand up against this that is what is necessary. We can't fight this fight for you. You need to fight the fight, and then all of the men, all of the right-thinking men will stand next to you and say, yeah, this can't go on. Women need to be protected. They need to have their own spaces, especially when they're going to be in a vulnerable position, like taking a shower, changing their clothes. Those need to be protected spaces for biological women. There's so many problems, and it's all done to cater to the smallest minority's feelings, when really what people need is they need help. And if you decide that you have this gender dysphoria and that you're in the wrong body, that must be horrible. I can't tell you how awful that must be to wake up every day and feel like you're in the wrong body. And if you do decide that that's who you are and you're going to live that way, you have to understand that not everything is open to you.
Well, I guess the worst part of the story, not even the lady having her own membership pulled. Well, she said there was a young girl that was like 12 years old in the corner of the locker room. And we did also have some reports, I think in the last month, to where there was a trans female, so man that was transitioning a woman in the woman's locker room, that had apparently exposed his penis to two workers at the Planet Fitness and then did it to a 15-year-old and eventually got arrested, obviously. But you're putting the most vulnerable people, even children, in harm's way to make a statement. And I'm fucking baffled here.
It's moral cowardice. These corporations, these people, they're not willing to stand up for what is right because they might get called names. And I honestly think that J.K. Rowling, who is as far left as you can get, actually standing up for biological women and pushing back against this trans ideology, I think has been a wake-up call. And it's kind of the rallying cry that a lot of people that, didn't feel like they had a voice have been able to kind of rally around and say, like, no, we're going to push back against this. And the normal population, these things always happen in our spaces first, because, we're people who are always kind of on the current trend of culture. But most people, they find out later. They're busy working their jobs. They don't pay attention to this stuff. Maybe they hear a little something about it, but they don't look into it because, they got to put food on the table. They got to take care of the kids. They got to get them off to school. But once what we call the normies start hearing about this and start pushing back on it, it's over. And the fact that Planet Fitness's stock has taken a dive because of their reaction to this is fantastic. Every single company that does this, every single company that has this moral cowardice, they need to be punished where it hurts them, which is financially. And so I'm glad their stock is tanking. I hope people are canceling their Planet Fitness memberships left and right and going to other gyms and going to gyms that are going to look out, for the safety of women. Because unfortunately, and this is not to say this is every person who has gender euphoria, but unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are predators that use it as a chance to get into these spaces. And we were told, no, that doesn't happen when the whole Target bathroom controversy was happening. But of course it happens. Any time you have a space where there's access to children or there's access to women, you're going to have predators lurking around.
Thankfully, it does appear there are a lot of people out there that are kind of getting fed up with this. The nonsense being pushed on us, the way they're trying to change culture to basically placate just a small group of people that do need help, but we're not giving them the help that they deserve. People like swimmer Riley Gaines are speaking out on this, and we're actually starting to see some results where people are coming to their senses and realizing maybe these mass changes to society that we're making aren't exactly beneficial, especially to the female population themselves. Former Kentucky swimmer Riley Gaines was among more than a dozen college athletes who filed a lawsuit against the NCAA on Thursday, accusing it of violating their Title IX rights by allowing transgender woman Leah Thomas to compete at the national championships in 2022. Thomas was the first openly transgender athlete to win a Division I title in any sport, finishing in front of 3 Olympic medalists for the championship. The lawsuit said the plaintiffs bring this case to secure for future generations of women the promise of Title IX that is being denied to them and other college women by the NCAA. And to just turn the tables on an entire demographic, half the population, and put them at a disadvantage from day one is disgusting behavior.
Yeah, it's, when you have these physical competitions and you have mediocre men that couldn't perform against other men go into and take these spaces and take these opportunities away from women, I think we need to stand firm against that. I think that Riley Gaines has been doing fantastic work bringing that to light. She is, of course, a swimmer, I believe, that was, that was cheated out of her victory by a biological man competing against her. Actually, I think they tied, but they were told that, for political reasons, we have to give the gold to, this Leah Thomas. And I don't know what Leah Thomas's actual name is, but, but Leah Thomas is a biological male, and thus was able to, wasn't even able to win tied, yet is elevated. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. You should not be in that space. You should be over with the men. And if you can't compete with the men, then I'm sorry, you just don't get a medal. Not everybody gets a medal.
I think we have done a couple of generations of Americans and Europeans and maybe in a couple of generations just worldwide, an incredible disservice to show them that the best way that you can help out somebody with mental health issues is to act like they don't exist, to go along with the fantasy and do nothing to actually help them. And I'm not surprised that there's a correlation between following in line with that stuff and being depressed yourself. And I'm not surprised that there's a correlation that more women, especially in education and stuff like that, fall along with that shit, whereas less men and more science-based people just can't believe it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that we've even entertained this nonsense as long as we have. And I think that pushback is coming. I hope that it doesn't result in violence, but these things often get worse before they get better. But the pendulum's swinging the other way. People are tired of this, and you're gonna see a lot of conflict. And who knows where we're gonna be in 10 years with all this? But I hope that we make some strides in mental health and getting people the help that they need, and no longer just just putting a stamp of approval on things because we can't be bothered to have the tough love to say, no, this is nonsense.
The one good thing I can say about all this stuff is at least we're allowed to start having conversations about this, or you're not immediately shut down for having these conversations. You're not censored. You can actually go out there and speak your mind just a little bit more than you were before. Now, will Aaron and I be shunned for having a conversation like this on YouTube? Oh, probably. But at least somebody got to hear a rational conversation about this, whether they agree with our points or they don't agree with our points. There's nothing wrong with discourse. If you disagree with Aaron and I, that's perfectly okay. That's what a conversation is all about. But at least it does appear maybe we can start having conversations about this stuff instead of governments and corporations just deciding all this for us and deciding that they're going to change our lives and how we live and the way that we're all allowed to see the world and what we think is right and what we think is wrong and what we think is protecting women and what we don't think is protecting women. It's absolutely insane what's going on here. And the fact that there are studies out there that demonstrate that at the heart of this are really unhappy, depressed communities makes me think this isn't the right path, that maybe there's a better way to do all this stuff and better conversations to have. If you would like to be a part of those, this was part of the Geek Fix on Thinking Critical Patreon. There is a more in-depth discussion about this as well as many other topics. It's well over 2 hours every single week. There's a link in the video description to the Patreon if you want to check that out and support us there and kind of bring some sanity to some of these conversations, because it does feel like we're living in a mad, mad world right now.